And welcome to my presentation on literacy in children and how that is going in America. We're going to take a look at the current rates of literacy in children throughout America, as well as why they are important, what standards they use, and what we can do to help kids become literate adults in the future. As you can see from the Frederick Douglass quote, reading is one of the most important and vital skills that you can have as an educated citizen, so it's super important for libraries to help students learn how to read. As you can see from the graph on the screen, over the past 10 years, we've seen a noticeable dip in the number of top performers in adult readers. These are adults who can read at or above a proficient standard, and a large jump up, almost 10%, in adults who cannot meet the basic proficient standards in reading. So this naturally begs the question, what's going on in schools that's, you know, causing less adults to be proficient as time goes on? From this chart here, you can also see that there's a pretty clear trend of states who have higher literacy rates versus those who have lower ones. The lower ones noticeably tend to be in the South, where it's warmer for a longer part of the year, and the northern states, where it's colder for a longer part of the year, seem to have higher literacy rates overall. People just want to go outside, it seems like, don't have time to read books. Note that for reading and for all around school performance in general, we saw a noticeable decline from the pre pandemic numbers in 2019, even still going as far as 2024. So, although literacy rates had been steadily climbing since the 1970s when we first began measuring them, it's pretty notable that a large number of students have seen a pretty significant drop since COVID. Virtual learning was not good for students. I can say that as a former teacher myself. But that's in the past. Now trying to look at where to go from here. Looking to define literacy in children, we should ask ourselves, what are we looking for in children to determine if they're literate? National Assessment of Education Progress is the organization that tracks literacy throughout the United States. They do a lot of statewide testing, and they have benchmarks of 150 to 350 for how they measure students all throughout school from K through 12. 150 to 250 are the assessments used for grade 4. Those three benchmarks the NAEP is looking at are the 250 level, which is the most proficient level, very advanced, that students can generalize ideas from a longer text, search for information, compare and contrast different passages, make inferences about what's able to happen next. 200 shows a lot of similar abilities. They can find ideas and facts from like a longer passage and make brief predictions about what's going to happen next, but not with the same mastery of 250. 150 it shows a pretty significant drop there. They can describe like pictures with simple words. They can pull simple facts from a longer text, but they don't really show mastery or detailed understanding of what they're reading. Wondering why we are looking at specific third grade reading levels or why third grade reading is so important. Like Gretchen Whitmer talks about it all the time. It's a pretty big benchmark that state and school leaders will talk about. That's because students from kindergarten through third grade are learning the process of reading, but starting in fourth grade, they start using reading to learn the material. So that slide we talked about, the 250 level, being able to take information from passages, compare and contrast, make inferences, the information you learn in school starts to be coming from longer and longer passages, longer textbooks, longer books, literary fiction. So being able to use these skills is now a requirement for your assignments. It's not just reading as a single subject on its own, it's incorporated to all the other disciplines. When we break down those categories by how many students are current proficiently at them, we see some pretty worrying trends. You see those bars full up at different levels, but that doesn't really give the whole story. So the first one, 92% of students are able to carry out that first level, which means that there's about 8% of them who are not able to meet that. So almost 10% of students can't meet even the most basic level that we're looking for in terms of reading proficiency by fourth grade. Similarly, the moderate level, we're seeing about 33% of students who cannot meet that benchmark there. So overall, if we're looking at all the students total who aren't meeting a proficient level, that's about 41% in total, which is a pretty alarming number to be sure. So, what are the reasons that we are seeing these low literacy rates? We're seeing different rates by socioeconomic status, by ethnic group. Well, there's a lot of them. It's a very complicated intertangle. So, one of the most recent discoveries is that poor instructional methods that don't emphasize the skills children need to develop as readers, aka phonics, sounding out the words, knowing how words sound. This is my time to rant against Lucy Calkins and her curriculum that was called balanced reading or cueing that was used in, I think, about 20% of schools nationwide until The Atlantic did this wonderful podcast called Sold a Story that basically explained kids aren't learning to read in this method, and it's something that teachers had been told for a long time was something that worked. Um, there's also other demographic factors. So if your parents aren't readers or modeling reading strategies with you or reading along with you, that also is a predictor of low literacy rates. High absenteeism from school. If you're not there to learn how to read, how are you going to do it? Um, Lack of access to reading material that intrinsically motivates children to read. So children will read things that they're interested in, but if they don't have books that necessarily grab their attention, that's going to be a stumbling point, which is why the We Need Diverse Books movement is so important. Um, and then another strong predictor is poverty or other circumstances that cause children to prioritize survival over learning. This could be homelessness, a family member incarcerated, um, severe abuse or something within the household, like pretty serious stuff that's going to distract students from focusing on reading or doing their schoolwork. While I would hope that intrinsically everyone would understand that it's important to be able to read and be able to care about others and want children to do well, there seems to be perhaps a growing contingent in this country who is only concerned about how events would impact them. So, if someone is watching this presentation and thinking, well, why do I care about literacy? Me and my children are doing fine. So, literacy is linked with a wide array of negative light outcomes that have a significant public externality that are going to need government intervention. So, about a third of illiterate adults are unemployed. Those that are employed typically make much lower than average salaries, so they're going to need to depend more on government assistance like SNAP or food stamps. Illiterate Americans are also more likely to report being in poor health, more likely to delay seeking treatment and to follow medical advice. So these are people who are going to create a larger public health burden. Um, in addition to the fact that about 85% of children who enter the criminal justice system have a low functional literacy, and literacy rates in prison for adults are estimated at 75%. So you're paying money to house them in prison if they're not able to get the low paying jobs that they can. So this is a huge public safety, public concern issue. It's not just, oh, I learned how to read so I can read James Patterson or whatever. It creates a lot of problems for all groups in society. So think about that. We reach the $1 million question. What can we do? And this is something that I grappled with a lot as a teacher too. If you looked at that causes slide, there's a lot of things that we can't really control. We can't lift every child out of poverty. We can't sit with a parent and force them to read to a student. But there are some things that we can control. What we as librarians can do is to make sure to have outreach programs to schools to connect books to students, go in and doing book talks, emphasizing the library service, promoting literacy programs within our own libraries, story times, book clubs, read to a dog, other early interventions, summer reading, things like that. Making sure our collections have access to books that interest kids, including diverse books, books for people of different backgrounds and abilities, including books in different formats. So, might be audiobooks, graphic novels, series, stuff like that, and then making sure we have accessible books for students with disabilities or have learning disabilities, neurodivergence. These are also big predictors of illiteracy too. So Bionic Text, which is a ADHD friendly text where the letters or the words are alternated in bold. Dyslexia friendly books, read aloud books for students to help with phonics or if you're visually impaired. There's a lot of things we as librarians can do that is within our locus of control.